The following podcast is for the sole purpose of entertainment and at no time represents an attorney-client relationship or legal advice from the hostess or her guests. For legal advice, please contact an attorney in your area. Welcome to Winning at Divorce. Please join our hostess as she welcomes guests to sit down with a favorite beverage and take a look at the many circumstances, stages, and processes of divorce and provide empowering anecdotes and tips to assist you in winning back your life. Our beautiful and talented hostess, Michelle Gregory, is a practicing Indiana divorce attorney, mediator, entrepreneur, and coach. For more information about her services, go to www.hmichellegregory.com. So pull up a seat, grab your favorite drink, and enjoy the show. And now, without further ado, here is the hostess of Winning at Divorce, Michelle Gregory.
Hi, and welcome back. I'm attorney Michelle Gregory, your Winning at Divorce podcast host, and I am back again for another episode. I think this is episode 7, right, Wes? Yep, episode 7. And we have a really wonderful guest here today, one of my good friends. But before we get into that, we always have a toast. And I forgot my favorite juice or something for today. But since it's a really hot, muggy day, I think water will be fine. So we'll do our quick toast to my good friend, James Ammeen. Do you go by James or Jim most of the time?
I go by both. Professionally, I like to go with James, but most people I know call me Jim.
I know. And so I hadn't talked to you in a while, so I was like, I forget which name I usually call you by because I use both. So here's a toast to our friendship, to the podcast, and may it be very successful with your episode on it. I'm so glad and honored to have you here today. Thank you.
I'm so glad you asked. Thank you.
We're going to have fun. This will be great. I think I'll leave the lid off. That's easier. I make less noise so Wes won't get on to me for crackling the bottle and stuff.
Yeah, I do that too.
Well, okay. So today's episode 7 is Winning at the Family Law. And the reason I've asked you here is because people always have questions about things like, what are the do's and don'ts of hiring an attorney? What do I need to discuss with my attorney? And why do I really need an attorney? But before we get into that, I always like to do a little introduction to my guests. So this is my dear friend. I've known him for years. We met through a mutual friend, Joanne, which we were just off camera talking about, that I talked to recently. Beautiful, wonderful lady. So James, give us some history about you, because you didn't send me your bio. So now I'm going to have to ask you all the questions. So tell me, where were you born?
I was born in New York City.
Okay.
Right across the street from Columbia University. And we moved out of the city when I was about 2 years old, and I grew up in the suburbs in Essex County, New Jersey, in a town called Verona.
Verona. My Sharona. Oh, that's not quite the same, is it?
Just like Romeo and Juliet.
Oh, okay. Verona. So you grew up there, graduated high school there?
Yes.
And then what did you do?
I went to Middlebury College in Vermont.
Vermont.
And majored in philosophy and history.
Oh, cool.
Played football, did college radio, attended bar.
Attended bar, college radio, and football. I bet he was the heartthrob for all the girls, weren't you?
I don't know about that, but I had fun.
Well, that's what college is for. So when you got out of college, what'd you do?
I went across the country in a pickup truck for a few months first.
No.
And then got back to the East Coast, and it was great. It was the first time I'd ever been west of Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. And so it was very eye-opening. And then I took a job for the holiday season in retail, and I enjoyed it. And then after the holidays, applied with Macy's New York and got into their training program, and worked at Macy's for almost 3 years.
Wow.
So I worked in the stores, in the store in Albany, New York, and then as an assistant buyer.
Oh, how cool.
So
that would be a fun job.
It is. Retail is a real work hard, play hard environment.
Isn't it kind of like you got to make the decision on what's going to sell the most that season and hope that you make the right choices?
We hope to make the right choices. There's a lot of analysis of numbers.
Yeah.
You're looking at comparing this year to last year, you're looking at sell-through rates. You're hoping you can get your buy-in on time to get the things, to rebuy the things that are moving, and when to take your markdowns and move your inventory out. And
so how did that parlay into wanting to become a lawyer?
Becoming a lawyer is something that I was interested in for a long time. I was one of those kids that talked a lot, had a pretty good vocabulary. Everybody said, you'd make a good lawyer. Oh. And so it was always something in my mind. And I majored in philosophy and then added history as a double. After I left Macy's, I went to a family-owned retailer for about a year. And that was a very different experience after being in the corporate world of retail to be in a family-owned business and not be in the family. Oh. And then I became a rep in women's ready-to-wear, a company called Cole of California, and it had 6 different lines of swimwear and resort wear. And it was in that period of time, those 3 years that I was on the road selling, that I'm looking at the things that you do to keep yourself motivated when you're in the car and you're listening to tapes. I got to a point where I didn't want to listen to radio anymore.
Yeah.
Because I was hearing the same songs
over and over,
and so listening to programs on sales and motivation, and began to take a look at what really motivates me. And what really motivates me was the idea of selling ideas rather than selling things.
Oh, okay.
And that brought me back to taking a look at law school. So I started law school when I was 29 years old.
Very good. Very good. And where did you go to school?
Went to law school in Indianapolis at Indiana University School of Law, Indianapolis, which is now called the McKinney School of Law, and graduated there in 1995, and was very active in the law school community. I was editor-in-chief of the International Comparative Law Review.
Oh, cool.
And served on Dean's Student Advisory Board. And
smart guy.
Yeah, I did a lot of different things. In my second or third year, I started working with some small law offices, 4-lawyer law office, and a sole practitioner named Russ Jones up in Carmel. And so I began to get a look at how the law was practiced in those kinds of shops.
So where did you land?
Well, I was very fortunate, and I got an offer from Chief Justice Shepard to become a law clerk at the Indiana Supreme Court.
That's impressive. Very nice.
So I did that for 2 years, and then from there I went to Baker and Daniels.
Oh, excellent, excellent law firm. Top.
Yeah, Indiana's oldest firm, although I don't know if they can claim that now that they've merged with Faegre Baker, or Faegre Drinker, Biddle and Reith.
Oh.
But Baker and Daniels has been around since 1863.
Yeah, that's when you're in law school, that's where everybody's hoping that they'll get picked up at.
So I was very fortunate.
So super smart guy, best of the best. So have you ever been married?
Once.
Yeah. And have you ever been divorced?
Once.
And so most of my guests have. So I always ask my guests, is there something that you offer a tip or some advice to someone who's either thinking about getting divorced, going through the process, or just on the other side? Any tips that you have from your personal experience of dealing with attorneys and going through the process?
I believe that, the two most important decisions one's going to make in their life is whether to get married or who to get married. I guess could be that one question with two parts. And the other is, whether to get divorced.
Yeah, it's a tough decision.
And the second one may, in the long run, be more important than the first. Because as you've gotten older, as you've obtained experience, as you've begun to accumulate property, as you have maybe brought children into the world, there are many more considerations affecting your life on the way out than there are on the way in.
Right.
And so when somebody is having some questions about their marital life, one of the first questions I ask is whether or not there's any possibility of reconciliation.
Right.
And I think it's very important that somebody explore that. Have they gone to counseling? Have they done things to make sure that their relationship is really coming to the place where this would be the best decision for themselves?
Really broken. Can't be fixed. It's really broken.
Well, we have to plead that it's irretrievably broken. And so
have they investigated all the avenues? And so did you seek out counseling yourself?
I did. I probably had more counseling than the average bear. We started some marital counseling 6 months in. Yeah. I got married in March of 1992 and started law school in August of 1992.
Ooh, that's tough.
And in the period of time from when I got married to when law school started, my wife's dad died. And so we never really had a honeymoon period because he was ill with cancer. He died 6 weeks after we were married. And so it was tough.
You didn't get off to a good start.
No, it's like the Grateful Dead say in Uncle John's band, the first days are the hardest days. Yeah. Well, they really were. And law school puts an enormous amount of pressure on a couple.
Just in general, it's a hard thing to do. But if you're married or you have children, it's really, really exhausting. It's taxing on all your time.
And it changes the way you think. As you change the way you think, it does change your personality somewhat.
It really does, because I remember going into law school like, woo! And then you think, oh, well, that was illegal back when, and I shouldn't have done that because that could have caused someone harm, or I didn't post that where I should have posted it, so I didn't have a liability. I mean, your mind starts clicking in a different way once you start reading the law and familiarizing yourself, because you're like, oh. And suddenly it kind of tames you, I think, a little bit, draws you in and tames you a little bit, makes you more aware of a possible, I mean, there's like a tort in every crack.
Sure.
You're like, oh my gosh, I can't do that anymore. So your advice to our podcast viewers today would be, before they make a decision to get divorced, they should seek marriage counseling first.
I think it's important that an individual take the time with somebody who is, in the sense, like a lawyer, bound by confidentiality rules to provide advice, and to look, to be loyal to you. So that's individual counseling. But to look at marital counseling, where the person is more of a mediator, but to get at some of the issues, I also strongly recommend that you take a look at something like Retrovai.
What's that?
Retrovai is spelled Retrouvaille. It's the French word for rediscovery.
Oh, okay.
And Retrovai is worldwide. It is it is based on, in many ways, on marriage encounter.
Okay.
And so it starts with a weekend retreat. Then there's a lot of writing of letters back and forth, and
makes me think of that movie.
And sharing, and it has a very positive effect on saving a lot of marriages. There are some. So
you kind of rekindle the relationship and just explore your problems and see if you can work through them and try to rekindle or something like that.
Yes, and improve your ability to appreciate each other's feelings and to communicate at a different level.
Yeah.
Now, ultimately, I wound up divorcing after going through Retrovai, but it was 8 years later, and the skills I learned and developed in the Retrovai process were very important, very useful to me as a parent, going through divorce and after divorce, and being able to co-parent effectively.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I talk about with people at the beginning is you're still a family.
Yeah.
Even though your marriage may end, you have children together.
Yeah.
And if you have children together, you will both, in a sense, be married for the rest of your children's lives, not your life, their lives. Because God willing, 50 years from now, you're going to be wondering who's hosting Thanksgiving dinner.
Exactly.
And are we all going to be together? Or are you going to be at a high school basketball playoff game together or a piano recital?
Birth of grandkids.
Right. A sweet 16 birthday party, whatever it might be. And so, you know, living in Indianapolis now for 29 years, I think about things sometimes in terms of the track, and you get one lap around the track in life, right? You don't want to spend that lap in the pits.
Yeah.
You want to get out of the garage. You don't want to crash in turn 2. You want to get back to the finish line or the starting line. And so, you know, to the yard of bricks. So you have to figure out how you're going to go through this process, recognizing that you're going to be dealing with your partner, former partner, for many years to come.
Yeah. And most people take the approach where when the divorce is over, I don't want you in my life. I wish you were dead. And I'm going to try to do everything I can to destroy you in my children's eyes and everybody else I know. And that's definitely the least effective and appropriate way to handle your relationship with your ex, the mother or father of your children, once the divorce is over. But it does seem like that's the commonplace as a lawyer. That's what I see a lot of. And you probably do too.
Well, you know, the business of practicing law and what we're trained to do as lawyers is in many ways counterintuitive to what's really the best for advising people going through this very traumatic experience, right? You know, we're trained to spot issues. We're trained to explain, you know, you could do this or you could do that, or they can do this or they can't do that. And we talk about rules and, you know, put these different markers in the ground and try to navigate a way. And there may be things that can be done that are legally okay, but they're not best for a person in terms of their whole life.
Yes.
And, you know, so I try to look at things from a more holistic view to say, you know, what can we do to help you get through this problem so that you can have a healthy relationship with your children, so your children can be healthy citizens.
Yes.
Because we're trying to raise young Americans here to you know, take care of our country and hopefully take care of us as we get older. And and we want these little people who are innocent, you know, to this drama between the parents to not be damaged by it.
Yeah, they're the ones that are most effective and most affected. Well, that's great advice. And I'm sure since you've been through divorce, that makes you a better attorney because you can give people a better perspective because you've co-parented and you've been through divorce. So why don't you tell everybody your name and phone number and contact information for me?
Well, my name is James Ammeen. That is spelled Ammeen. And I am a partner in the law firm Ammeen Valenzuela Associates, another long and difficult name to spell, Valenzuela, Valenzuela Associates, LLP. My partner is Sarah Valenzuela, and she does not practice in family law. Her practice is largely centered around financial institutions, in particular credit unions. She's an expert in representing credit unions and serves as an outside general counsel for many of the credit unions operating in Indiana.
Cool.
And so, and she does estate planning work. And that is something that can come up post-dissolution that needs to be talked about, that a lot of times people don't even want to think about when they're going through divorce, but you do need to think about, you know, what might need to be done with assets and estate planning down the road.
And we did an episode a couple months ago. I had an estate planner here, Stephen Douglas, who's an attorney here. And he does estate planning as an attorney. And so what I've been trying to, get my point across with my podcast is it takes a team. It takes a team of professionals to get a divorce done, to really win at divorce, because it's not just your lawyer, but it's your counselor, it's your financial advisors, it's your family law attorney, and any other professionals that you might need. So that's what I've been explaining to people here at Winning at Divorce. And so I appreciate all your tips. And that wraps up this segment, the first segment. And we've met my friend Jim Ammeen, who is a family law attorney up in Indianapolis, Indiana. So if you need one, he's a great one. Excellent guy personally, as well as a great friend of mine and a very good family law attorney. In fact, I call him sometimes when I have questions. So that tells you how good he is. And so that wraps up, and don't leave. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with segment 2. We're going to talk about some do's and don'ts and why you need an attorney, and dig in deep to what really goes on in family law and why you need a family law attorney like Jim Ammeen. We'll be right back. Don't leave us.
Thank you for listening to Winning at Divorce with your hostess, Michelle Gregory. This is not a breakup, it's just a quick break. We'll be right back after these messages from our generous sponsors.
Divorce is the most emotional and stressful time in anyone's life, and it is a global phenomenon that stretches across most cultures and backgrounds. Hi, I'm your Winning at Divorce coach, Michelle Gregory, as well as a divorce attorney, mediator, and entrepreneur. My coaching clients come to me to bridge the gap between their attorney and their therapist. As a divorce coach, I can assist you with planning, preparing, and winning at divorce. As Zig Ziglar once said, you were born to win, but to be a winner, you must plan to win, prepare to win, and expect to win. For more detailed information, visit hmichellegregory.com or call me at 812-339-3600 to get started on your journey towards winning at divorce.
Welcome back to Winning at Divorce, and thank you for staying tuned in with us. Don't forget to check out our website at www.hmichellegregory.com. And once again, here's our fabulous hostess, Michelle Gregory.
Thanks for staying tuned, and we're back with Winning at Divorce podcast. I'm your hostess, Michelle Gregory. I'm an attorney, I'm a mediator, and I am a divorce coach. And I'm so blessed today to have a very good friend of mine, a dear old friend of mine, not old because he's got gray in his whiskers, but an old friend of mine, Jim Ammeen, who is a family law attorney up in Indianapolis. And if you watched the first segment, then you know all about his bio, his history, and how great he was as a lawyer. So now I thought it'd be kind of good. People often are afraid to hire a lawyer. So why is it important to hire a lawyer when you're going through a divorce? Because a lot of people are like, oh, they're expensive. I don't want to do that. La, la, la. So why would you say it's important to hire an attorney when you're going through a divorce?
I think divorce may be the most important decision you make as an adult.
Yeah.
Certainly as important as getting married in the first place. But and so why would you want to do that without having some expert advice?
Right.
And, it is a court proceeding,
mm-hmm.
and it results in court orders.
Final orders.
And, it helps to have somebody who's trained and licensed to put that paperwork in order so that you don't make a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
If all you had to do was sleep at a Holiday Inn Express and get up and run a Google search to be a lawyer, you wouldn't need law schools and you wouldn't need a bar exam.
Yeah.
The reality is there are a lot of subtleties and nuance in how things get put together,
right.
especially if children are involved.
Right.
And depending on the age of the children, whether they're, toddlers or whether they're in school, in elementary school or high school, whether they're in college, mm-hmm. how do you go about, preparing to pay for college mm-hmm. or handling matters that involve
kind of like you don't know what you don't know unless you sit down with an expert so that you can truly know and understand what sort of things you should be thinking about. Because a lot of times people will do the DIY divorce papers And then 6 months or a year later, they're back in my office and they're like, well, we had a retirement, but we didn't put it on here. So what happens to that? Or we didn't spell out the parenting time schedule very well, and I never get to see my children. So a lot of times you don't know what you don't know unless you sit down with at least have an initial consult with an attorney so that you can have some sort of idea what you need to be doing, right?
That's correct. And one of the things that's important to understand is that the attorney-client privilege is a very valuable thing. Yeah. It's an important thing. And so when you talk to an attorney, what you tell the attorney is kept confidential by the attorney. Mm-hmm. And that attorney owes you a duty of loyalty. It's called fiduciary duty. And so that the lawyer then gives you some advice, the attorney's work product, their mental impressions. And as long as you keep that confidential, it will stay confidential, and you can get somebody who's loyal to you telling you where some of your risk is.
Right.
And that's important to understand how to minimize your risk.
And every lawyer's different, and every lawyer has a different style and emphasizes certain things, and they have different backgrounds and personal experience. So I think it's personally good to go to a lawyer who's been divorced, who has co-parented, who can actually say, you know, before this happened to me, I would have advised someone this way. But now that I've personally experienced, I know how to advise someone better, because a lot of times someone who is a young attorney, and there's nothing wrong with young attorneys, but they've never been married, they've never been divorced, they don't have children. You've got the situation where they don't know either. So hiring an experienced attorney like yourself is critical to minimize risk, because you really, like you said, you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
And it's good to have somebody who's walked that path before, give you some advice.
Yeah. It also reduces stress and frees up your time, because you're not the one researching and trying to figure it out.
Well, one thing that's important that, you know, I'm not sure all lawyers keep it in mind, honestly, but but certainly non-lawyers wouldn't realize that, you know, when a property settlement agreement is entered as a final order with a divorce decree, the judge has no power to reopen that later. Yeah. There's certain issues that can be reopened. You know, modification of custody, modification of support, post-secondary education expense, some things like that. Maintenance, if there's a maintenance award, can be reopened, but a property settlement agreement can't.
So if they forget to put something in that agreement, where does it go?
The court will have no jurisdiction over it, and there will be an ongoing battle over it down the road, or you're going to spend a lot of money on lawyers later to allege that there was fraud in the creation of the property settlement agreement to get the court to reopen it. So sooner or later, you're going to wind up spending a lot of money on litigation that could be avoided up front if the agreement was put together properly in the first instance.
And I think that's what most people don't understand, is that they're just thinking, oh, I'm going to go to the lawyer, it's going to be expensive, it's going to be this drawn out process. But what they don't realize is the value of avoiding those mistakes, like you said, so that they don't have litigation or further attorney fees and costs later down the road, because they can't foresee that possibility of happening. So it's really critical that they come see a family law attorney who's experienced.
And there is no substitute for experience.
Yeah.
I believe I'm not sure who said it or wrote it, but the information is not knowledge, but experience is knowledge, right? So you could learn facts, but you're not gaining knowledge by that. But having had a real experience, then you can. And so if your lawyer has done this more than once and has some experience going down the path, then you're probably going to get better advice at how to avoid having unnecessary fights and spending unnecessary attorney's fees.
Well put. So let's talk about the process a little bit. So someone decides they want a divorce. What do they do next?
Well, like I had suggested in the first segment that you counsel. And if you've done that, you've come to the place where this is it. Something's got to change because what I'm doing isn't working.
Right.
Come into the lawyer's office and you need to come in with as much information as you can gather on your own.
On the first initial consult?
I think it's important to bring it in as early as possible. So
it helps get things in motion.
You have to pay a retainer to the attorney and you get to sign an engagement agreement to get the attorney hired. Once the attorney is hired, then you have, the power of the attorney-client privilege to protect the confidentiality of the information you bring. Now, some things are not necessarily going to remain confidential down the road. Bank statements on joint bank accounts, for example, are not going to be confidential because both parties have access to the information.
Or should.
Well, they should have it. You may find out that they don't, but that's a different issue. But you should come prepared to, if you haven't already filled out a questionnaire or done some kind of interview with the attorney before the real meetings start, you should be coming in with your bank statements, your retirement statements, any papers you have relating to your home, your mortgage, your lease, if you're renting, car papers, even if they're not originals. But you should gather what information you can from your home before you walk into the attorney's office, because you don't want to spend money taking formal discovery later if you had access to the information up front.
Right. So you can avoid possibly some expenses. And it's also good because a lot of times, as soon as someone knows you want a divorce, things disappear.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
And for all you know, your partner has already been planning for this event to occur and may already be secreting assets. Right. So you need to gather as much information up front and not be afraid to present it to your attorney. Whether it's good or bad, your attorney needs to know it because, and I would say, especially if it's bad, the attorney needs to know where the landmines are in order to,
we don't be surprised.
The worst thing that can happen in any legal proceeding is for your lawyer to be surprised in front of the judge.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It tells the judge that the attorney is not prepared, or the client has not disclosed everything to the attorney, or the client has lied to the attorney. And it's just plain bad. You and your attorney lose credibility with the judge.
Right. Absolutely. Just that simple. Because the judge doesn't have time for nonsense.
No. Their judges are busy people.
Yeah.
They have thousands of cases in their docket. And, I don't want to say you're just a number in front of the judge, because the judges work really hard. Yeah. And they do their best to put their heart and soul into every case that comes before them. But the reality is there's 10 more lined up behind you probably that afternoon.
Yeah, no kidding. Exactly. So, okay. So they come to you. So they don't know anything about divorce, and they're not sure really, do they want a divorce? Do they want annulment? Do they want a legal separation? They're not really sure what to do. A lot of people come to me and they'll say, oh, we never consummated the marriage, so I want an annulment. Well, they've been married a year, so, so a lot of people don't understand the differences and why it's allowed. So explain annulment versus a dissolution versus a legal separation, how that works.
Well, an annulment is to say that the marriage never really occurred.
Yeah.
That it's exist. Void from the beginning. And so the circumstances by which it can come up are really pretty narrow.
Yeah.
I think I've had one in my career. It was a long time ago, and I forget what the factual circumstances were, but they were narrow.
Yeah. I think I've had people come in, but they don't meet the statute to file. You're in 99.9% of the cases, you're legally married and in the state of Indiana.
You need to go down the path of either legal separation or divorce.
Right. And so why is legal separation good?
Well, I will tell you from my own personal experience that filing legal separation was, I had no idea at the time that it was brilliant, but it was brilliant. My ex-wife and I had been in several years of counseling. We were still involved with the RetroVi program that I talked about in the first segment.
Right.
Our children were 10 and 7 at the time.
Oh, babies.
And, we just couldn't get along. We just couldn't co-parent together. My son's on the autism spectrum. We had an IEP. There were lots of conflict about whether to medicate, not to medicate. Different,
typical marital things that come up,
right,
that cause problems.
And two strong-willed people who were competing to be super parent. And I finally hit a point where I said, what we've been doing isn't working.
Yeah.
And I have to do something different. But I didn't want to get divorced.
Yeah.
So I met with an attorney and several times.
So an attorney meeting with an attorney. Very wise. And
decided that I wanted to file for legal separation. And our counselor, when I told him and my ex-wife that I had filed on the prior Thursday, and this was on a Monday morning, we talked about the message, and the message was that you guys need to make this a unified message. You need to whatever you tell the children needs to be we. It can't be you or he or she.
Valuable.
And so like the next Saturday this is Sunday actually, I think. No, it was Saturday morning, and we had a family meeting around the table, and we told the children that Mommy and Daddy were going to separate. And
which doesn't mean you're going to end it. It means you're just separating.
Right.
Right.
And that, I was going to, find a place to live, and I was going to move out, and we're going to see if we can make things work. And my children understood that meant the family wasn't going to be shredded.
Right.
It got me to think, like every movie from Disney, there's always a single parent, and whether it's the Little Mermaid or it's Pocahontas or it's just single parent that you're dealing with, and that was it, or it's Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah.
And so the children,
they understand,
wound up being able to accept this change in the family dynamic in a way that I had never foresaw coming, but for which I will be eternally grateful.
Right.
So we went through the process of separating. Sandy and I continued to see the counselor for the next couple of months until I moved out. And so we were really at this point getting counseling on how to co-parent.
Right.
And so the children were able to
adapt.
To adapt. I mean,
to deal with the transition, because I think with the legal separation, they hear that kids know what separate means, and they know what divorce means. Like you said, it's in all of the movies these days, and kids are watching them and their friends and talking about it at school. But, when you tell children that we're taking a break, kids know what taking a break means.
Yeah, they know what timeouts are.
They know what timeout is. So, parents are taking a timeout, and that makes good sense. And telling your kids to gather is quality, showing how how important your children were versus winning the game. And I tell people all the time, it's not about winning as in scoring. It's about doing the right things. And it sounds like you and Sandy did try your best to do the right things regarding your children and your marriage. But in the state of Indiana, you can't stay legally separated for very long.
No, it's 1 year.
1 year.
And you know, I look at that statute and I think, you know, geez, it should be more flexible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because 1 year is not very long to adjust, because it seems like you just get that separation decree and you start kind of trying to feel out what to do or not to do or how to merge back together or not. And boom, it's time's up.
That's true. But the way I look at it from a more legalistic element is to draw a parallel to bankruptcy.
Mm.
And divorce is like bankruptcy of the marriage.
Right.
Okay. And so legal separation is like a reorganization. It would be like a chapter 13 or a chapter 11 bankruptcy where you could reorganize and maybe, you know, reorganize your debt, restructure it, come out and emerge, you know, from the bankruptcy, you know, and move forward. And if you can't, you liquidate.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And both proceedings start with a petition, and the petition date is very important.
Right.
And your assets are valued as of the petition date. Your debts are valued as of the petition date. And it works the same way. So a 1 year reorganization period under a legal separation makes sense in that regard. Yeah. And you figure out whether or not you're going to be able to reconcile or you need to have a more permanent arrangement to disentangle yourselves. But, you know, the other thing that legal separation allows for is that Indiana generally does not allow for a post-nuptial agreement. Mm-hmm. You could have a prenuptial agreement before getting married, but you can't have one unless the consideration given for it is
to reconcile.
Is to reconcile. Is in
save the marriage.
Right.
Right.
And so if you're legally separated, now you can, and you now restructure your financial affairs and then decide to stay together, you can dismiss the petition, and that would be sufficient consideration as a matter of contract law, matrimonial contract law under Indiana law. Right.
And you can negotiate that during the legal separation, that if we get back together through your counseling or whatever you're doing, hopefully, put that together, have your attorney put that together to post-nup. Because in that way you have a contract. Because a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to get back together because of financial reasons or addictions or some various things. And they're afraid, you know, what's going to happen to them and their property. So that's a great idea. Sometimes people take their legal settlement decree and just take the wording out of that and put it into a post-nup on how they're going to handle their assets a lot of times. So that's real effective. And then a dissolution, that's final. So you really got to know you want a divorce, right?
Well, and again, my personal experience, you know, the provisional order that we entered into at the time that I was leaving the marital residence basically wound up becoming 90% of what the final order was. What we discovered in the course of that first year was that the parenting time arrangement that we had come up with worked.
Yeah.
That the amount of support that was being paid worked.
Right.
And
it's kind of like a trial run.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you get this opportunity to see how the family dynamic's going to work.
Yeah.
And one of the things we found was that, you know, eliminating the really divisive confrontation that was going on all the time.
Yeah.
Improved the spiritual and mental health of everybody in the family.
Which is key. That's excellent advice. I love it. Well, I think that pretty much gets us through segment 2 on why you need a a family law attorney with my friend Jim Ammeen. And so we're going to take a quick break so we can hear from our sponsors. Again, I'm attorney Michelle Gregory, your host of Winning at Divorce podcast. I'm a mediator, divorce attorney, and divorce coach. And we'll be right back after these messages.
Thank you for listening to Winning at Divorce with your hostess, Michelle Gregory. This is not a breakup, it's just a quick break. We'll be right back after these messages from our generous sponsors.
Divorce is the most emotional and stressful time in anyone's life, and it is a global phenomenon that stretches across most cultures and backgrounds. Hi, I'm your Winning at Divorce coach, Michelle Gregory, as well as a divorce attorney, mediator, and entrepreneur. My coaching clients come to me to bridge the gap between their attorney and their therapist. As a divorce coach, I can assist you with planning, preparing, and winning at divorce. As Zig Ziglar once said, "You were born to win, but to be a winner, you must plan to win, prepare to win, and expect to win." For more detailed information, visit hmichellegregory.com or call me at 812-339-3600 to get started on your journey towards winning at divorce.
Welcome back to Winning at Divorce, and thank you for staying tuned in with us. Don't forget to check out our website at www.hmichellegregory.com. And once again, here's our fabulous hostess, Michelle Gregory.
Hi, I'm Michelle Gregory, your Winning at Divorce podcast host, and we're back for segment 3. And we're here today with my very, very good friend and excellent family law attorney, Jim Ammeen, or James Ammeen if you prefer. He goes by either one. And we just got through talking about why it's important to hire a family law attorney, so you don't make mistakes and you reduce stress and your risk. But I think it's really important that we touch quickly on some things, Jim, about what the major issues are that you're going to be dealing with, regardless if you get a divorce or a legal separation. And so I was kind of thinking of just some of the basics that we can touch on, some of the property, child-related issues, and I know there's a long list of those, and alimony or spousal maintenance, because people get a little confused of which, and the process of how to come to the settlement. So I know we don't have much more time left. So if we can kind of zoom through some of these and start with property.
Well, it's really important to know who owns the property.
Well, I thought everybody does in a marriage. That was both. I thought it was a marital asset.
That's not always the case.
Not always the case. Okay.
Sometimes the house is only in the wife's name, but the husband's making all the payments.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they did that because somebody had bad credit or somebody owns a business or for whatever reason, things have been structured that way.
But in the state of Indiana, it's all marital property.
Well, marital property is counted jointly, but we're not a community property state. This is not Wisconsin. This is not California. And so it's not all part of the marital pot necessarily.
Right.
You may have to prove that it's part of the marital pot. It just depends. But generally speaking, most couples own their houses, husband and wife. It's important to take a look at the deed. So who has control of the documents from when the house was purchased is important. You can get these documents online, but if you go to get them online, you might spend $25 in search charges. I mean, so if you want to do things inexpensively, get your paperwork together and bring it to the lawyer's office so the lawyer can see whose name is on the deed, whether it's tenants in common or tenants by the entireties, or, who's on the mortgage, who's on the promissory note.
But what about that 10-year note, that 10-year line? Oh, if it's been marriages more than 10 years, it's automatically 50-50.
The statutes allow for separate property. Mm-hmm. And so you could have a dispute about whether or not property is marital property.
So if you brought it into the marriage, it possibly could be taken off of the marital balance sheet.
Sure. Was it inherited? Was it something you owned before the marriage? Was it always kept separately? Was it used as within the marriage? Mm-hmm. And, people may have gotten married in different states with different expectations as well. Mm-hmm. So while most states have statutes that are similar, there are some substantial differences.
Like California, Texas.
No, Texas is a common law state.
Yeah.
So that's a whole different issue we won't get into today. Yeah. But living together and holding yourself out as a couple You may find that you are married in Texas when you're not in Indiana.
That's right.
So
they do have common law marriage there. So, all right. So things that are property in a divorce. So you have real estate, you have your businesses, retirements, you have personal property. Anything else?
Well, personal property is a much broader category than real property.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Real property, it's land and buildings, right?
And personal property is pretty much everything else.
Right.
Yeah.
So it ranges from this microphone to
your toothbrush, your underwear,
to money, to retirement accounts, patents, copyrights.
Yeah.
I mean, there things that would be considered a general intangible in a commercial law setting, may be marital assets depending on the particular facts of the marriage.
Yeah.
So especially if you have a couple that are partners in a business, the goodwill of a business is something that has value, and who gets control of the business down the road and how you value that are important things, which comes back to making sure that you have copies of records.
Yep. Very important, because sometimes those records disappear, and then it's really difficult to find them if you can.
Sure. I mean, if you have a copy of last year's tax return, that would be, or 2 years ago tax return, be very helpful. You can get a copy from the IRS, but
time and money to get it.
Correct.
Yeah. Anything important about the property that you want to share other than that before we go into talking about child-related issues, which most people are more interested in? What about inheritance? That was one you mentioned. That's an important one.
Property that's inherited can have a lot of different characteristics to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it may be something that, the couple or the family is living off of, the income being generated by an inheritance. But it may not be. It may be held in a separate entity like a trust.
So who gets it?
It would depend.
Yeah.
But in any event, it counts to figure out the value. So one of the things that we do as attorneys is, we tally all the assets on one side of the ledger and we tally all the debts on the other. And then, state law provides that the presumption is that it's going to be a 50-50 split. There may be extenuating circumstances that cause that to be adjusted, but that's the starting point. And so, you may have inherited, say, a painting. That painting may be worth $1,000. It may be worth $10,000. Who gets control of the painting? It may stick with the person who inherited it, but they may have to account for that $10,000 or half of that $10,000 somewhere else.
Yeah. It's like a trade-off. Yeah.
And that's why you need an attorney to help figure it out.
That's right. And you mentioned earlier that once you make the decisions and you put it in your divorce settlement, the judge can't change it.
No. I've been involved in a case over the last year and a half that it just all of this post-dissolution litigation and, both parties are not performing the agreement.
Oh, dear.
And and the court has come back and said, look, I can't modify this decree.
Yeah.
Because the easy solution would have been to say, okay, she gets this house and you get that house.
Yeah.
And, and figure out. And the judge said, no, can't do that. I'm going to enforce the decree. You need to sell both houses. And now the other spouse has been fighting my client and really fighting me, ever since to prevent the house from being sold.
Oh, goodness.
And
so it can get tricky if you don't do it right the first time.
Right.
Yeah. And so let's get into some of the child-related issues because, most people who are married typically have children that are minors. And there's a lot that goes into the decree relating to children. And so just wanted to touch on some, a lot of people don't understand custody. That one's a big one. Legal custody, physical custody, shared custody, sole custody. So why don't you explain that real quick?
Custody has, two strands.
Mm-hmm.
The physical custody, it's where the child spends his or her night.
Yeah.
Okay. Overnights. And legal custody concerns the big decisions.
Mm-hmm.
School, religion, major medical decisions,
general upbringing,
generally general upbringing, but the major decisions, and honestly, it seems that where that line gets drawn can vary, to get braces or not get braces. Some people consider that not a major decision, and other people, it's a very major decision. And it's, in that regard, it's probably driven by the cost of getting the braces.
Right.
But
everybody's income.
But say you have a child who has some special needs.
Yeah.
Parents who have a special needs child, more than 70% wind up divorced.
Oh my goodness.
And so, because it creates so much stress within the relationship, and how are those decisions made in the courts? Judges are human beings.
Right.
Okay?
Of course.
They don't want to decide.
Right.
We could pick up the Bible and look at the book of Kings and see that King Solomon didn't want to decide.
Cut that baby in half.
So, this is not new.
Right.
So the best thing that could be done would be to come up with a co-parenting plan that allows for the parents to have joint legal custody, no matter who has physical custody, for the parents to have joint legal custody, so that there are ways to resolve disputes on major decisions.
But that's difficult, because if they're not getting along and they're arguing in the marriage, then there's a high percentage or likelihood that they're not going to agree on these things if they have shared legal custody. And so you're right back in court, right back in mediation, nothing's getting resolved. So, if it's a high conflict or a history of abuse, that joint legal custody can be difficult.
It could be,
yeah.
and most likely will be. And so you hopefully can counsel your client to find a way to lessen the opportunities for dispute and to lessen the opportunity for confrontation.
Yeah.
So there may be things as simple as making sure that the transfers of children in from custody are handled in neutral ways. Like the father drops the child off at school and mom picks the child up at school after school. They don't have to see each other. There's no opportunity for conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, life doesn't always work like that, where schools get to be that neutral mediator.
Right.
There are times you're going to wind up in the same place at the same time. It might be a hockey game.
So I always suggest, when it comes to the custody and the parenting time arrangement, the more detailed it is, the better in your settlement agreement. In most cases, that's the best.
Yeah, in most cases, too much detail can create opportunities for conflict too.
Yeah.
So you need to try and find a place, a medium point. Because some people really want to hold the other person
mm-hmm.
to the letter of a piece of paper. And
mm-hmm.
if they're 5 minutes late, they want to file a contempt petition. And, yeah. Those things are not, they don't make for a good life.
No.
Okay. Like I said, you want to get all the way around the track. You don't want to crash in turn 2.
Right.
And you don't want to spend your life in the pits, literally and figuratively. So,
mm-hmm.
You need to have some flexibility. Now, there are judges who enter orders that say we're going to leave custody to the parents to figure out. To me, I've seen it more than once.
Wow.
You get people who can't get along.
How are they going
And
to
you're
figure that
telling
out?
them now you're going to figure out, what a fair and equitable parenting time arrangement is without, lawyers or court involvement. I think
That
you're bound to
doesn't make
wind
sense.
up having somebody feel very cheated
Yeah.
down the road.
Yeah. And parenting time is typically based on what the parties were doing before they filed for divorce, but not always, right?
Not always. I mean, parenting time it involves questions of power, to be perfectly candid about it. And so there's a power dynamic in the relationship that good lawyers will help to, will understand and will work with each other to help come up with a plan that can work for their clients.
But most judges I've seen is more like, let's keep the children in a similar circumstance that they were in before the filing, if it's a healthy one. So if one person was the primary caregiver, the other one was not, then that's typically how judges will usually rule.
Well, and again, the legislature's decided that the most important consideration is the best interest of the children.
Right.
And so if you and I can stay focused on the best interest of the children, hopefully we can convince our clients to stay focused on the best interest of the children. And continuity is important. One of the things I tell people that early on in our attorney-client relationship is that there are really only two things that matter to children, right? They want to know that they are loved, and they want to know that they're safe.
Yes.
And sometimes feeling safe comes from feeling loved, and sometimes feeling loved comes from feeling safe.
Excellent.
And so if we work to make the children feel that they are not pawns in a power battle between the parents.
Excellent.
If they are in a place where they are safe and loved, whether they're with mom or whether they're with dad, then we're succeeding and they can win at divorce.
Yeah.
And to say, okay, our marital relationship's not working.
Right.
I need something new. You need something new. Fine. But we have these beautiful children. What can we do to make sure that they grow up to be healthy and happy, productive citizens?
Exactly. Excellent. So a lot of people also ask me, well, who gets the tax credit?
Well, it's a negotiated point. I mean, under federal tax law, the parent who has, 183 overnights gets to take the dependent exemption, but that can be negotiated away, but it needs to be written in the order. So if you're trying to do the order yourself and you don't address that, you might be out of luck.
So who pays the health insurance and dental insurance?
In my experience, the court looks to the person with the better job whose employer is providing health insurance to continue to provide health insurance, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the case, especially now since the Affordable Care Act has been in place. The ability to obtain health insurance at reasonable cost is available to anybody.
Pretty much, yeah.
And so it may just become a question of making sure that there's a financial allocation for the health insurance premium. One thing that it would be good to do with while we're mentioning insurance is to think about life insurance and using that to secure child support, because say your kids are 7 and 10 like mine were, something could happen and one of the parents could pass away.
Yeah. And we had that in one of our other episodes where we had an insurance person on here who was talking about the importance of having life insurance and disability insurance to kind of guarantee any future child support payments if you pass.
Yes, it's very important. And it goes both ways.
Yes.
Okay. I knew where I was in my career that if I was going to say I need to have 50% of the overnights, aside from the fact that I would have had a huge fight on my hands, that it was going to be very difficult for me to perform that and perform it well. And so I agreed that I would have 10 overnights a month, which meant mom got 20 overnights a month. And if something, and so that meant I was paying support to her.
Right.
Okay. But if something happened to her forget the fact that I won't have to pay child support anymore. My entire world would be turned upside down in terms of how I manage my business as a sole practitioner at the time, as an attorney. And, you know, would I be able to maintain that business at all, or would I have to quit work?
Yeah, because your whole life would be turned upside down because you'd be full-time parent.
Right. So having life insurance on my ex-wife was an important security for me.
Right.
And
so did you guys get policies against each other?
Well, we already had policies.
Okay.
We already had whole life policies. I continued to pay all the premiums, and I took ownership of the policies.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So
because it can happen the other way around too.
Sure.
You could have passed, and then she would have been left with having to take care of the children full time, and depending on what's in your estate, if the kids would have been taken care of or not.
Right. Exactly. And in my brother's case, his wife died at age 49, leaving him with an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old girl.
Wow.
Fortunately, he had a policy on her. And you
know, you don't have to be divorced for this to be a problem, because this happens too with people who are married.
Right.
If one spouse passes, then the other spouse is left to care for the children and provide. And sometimes people will turn around and get married to someone that they maybe shouldn't, but just to add more income to the household. And it's just better, I think, overall.
It allows for you to be able to make decisions for the right reason, because you can retain your independence.
Exactly.
If it was necessary for me to become a Mr. Mom full-time dad and shut my business down, I could have done that. With
a little nest egg from life insurance.
Right.
Exactly.
And, you know, if I needed to take a year off, I could have done that.
Right.
Whatever was needed, you know, would have been to bridge that period of time with that loss. Because, you know what, if that something happens to one of the parents, your children are going to grieve.
And you can get term life insurance on somebody really cheap.
Yes.
Yeah, really cheap.
But keep in mind that the grieving is, you need to be there for the kids.
Exactly. So who pays for college or private schools?
It's a negotiated point. My children went to an Episcopalian school, and I willingly took that expense on in my case.
Because it was important to you.
Because it was important to me.
Right.
And I came with the view that I was going to pay this expense whether I was married or not.
That's excellent.
So, but that's not everybody shares that view, and you know, not. So, you know, it just depends, but it's negotiated. College, you know, the post-secondary education worksheet is basically the child support obligation worksheet, only you've put some different inputs in based on the tuition, the cost of room and board and books and travel, and whether or not the child has a scholarship or loans. I mean, so there is a formula, right? You can go on the Indiana Supreme Court website and click on the child support obligation worksheet and figure this all out for yourself.
But some people don't believe that they should be responsible for their kids going to college. Their parents didn't pay for them, or they didn't go to college.
Well, if you don't reach an agreement, you can always let the judge make the agreement for you.
Because the judge does have the authority.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's never good to have a third party make the decision for you.
Yeah.
And honestly, you know, the judges count on you and me to negotiate
the lawyers
with the other lawyers to come up with a plan that will work for these people. And to get philosophical about it for a moment, you know, the third branch of government exists for one main reason, and that is to resolve disputes.
Yes.
Okay. The whole reason the courts are there is to keep people from exacting vigilante justice, to keep people from shooting each other, and to prevent the rule of might is right.
That might be fun, though.
Right. There are times we all think that would be a solution. But the purpose is to resolve disputes.
Right.
And so we as attorneys are to help our clients negotiate through their problem and resolve the dispute, hopefully without going in front of the judge for anything other than approval.
Right.
If you have brothers and sisters and you fight in the backyard and you come running into the kitchen and say, he hit me first.
Yeah.
Parents going to say, I don't care. Go to your room.
Yeah, leave me alone. I'm doing something.
And so think about the judge that way. The judge is going, I don't care who hit each other first. You got 2 kids to take care of.
Yeah.
How are we going to do this to make sure that they're okay, that they're not injured by,
Excellent.
shrapnel and collateral damage here?
There's plenty in those high conflict divorces. So just quickly, switch gears just for a second. Indiana has spousal maintenance, and I get asked this all the time. Quickly, tell us about spousal maintenance.
Well, I take the view that maintenance is basically alimony. Indiana allows it for up to 3 years. Generally, you have to show some basis for it unless you agree to it up front. From tax purposes, it's treated like alimony.
Yeah.
So it's deductible to the person who's paying it, and it's taxable income to the person receiving it. But it's for the stay-at-home mom who gave up her career to stay home with the children so that she can get her feet back on the ground.
Or a parent who has a child with disabilities of some sort. Or something like that.
And if there is a disability, it can extend beyond 3 years.
Yeah.
So it can become a hotly contested issue if there's somebody with a permanent disability.
Or even your spouse has been disabled.
Yes.
Yeah. So it could go on forever.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, well, I know we're running out of time, and I'm so glad you were here. This is so fantastic. I'm so glad I get to see you. And great tips and information. We could talk for hours, but we would bore you to death. But there's so much involved in family law, and that's the reason we could talk for hours, because there's so much more. I mean, there's so many things that we did not touch on. That's why it's extremely important that you get an experienced family law attorney to help you with your divorce, like Jim Ammeen or myself, to help get you through all this. And the more complicated your life is, the more complicated your situation is, the more important it is that you have a family law attorney or someone to help you. So, Jim, give them one more time all of your information, how they can find you.
James Ammeen, or James J. Ammeen Jr., just so you don't get my dad on your search. But my law firm is Ammeen Valenzuela Associates, LLP. We're located at the corner of Delaware and Market Street, across the street from City Hall in Indianapolis at 155 East Market Street. Indianapolis 46204. And when this global pandemic is over, we would love for you to come visit us in our office.
Are you guys doing Zoom now?
We'll do Zoom. We'll do whatever it takes. I actually make house calls.
Oh, good. Put your little mask on and go visit people?
Yes.
Yep.
It's in the words of the immortal Yogi Berra, you can observe a lot by watching.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's really important to go out and see the house.
Yeah.
Or to meet the children.
Yeah. And do your little own home study.
Yeah. It was.
Well, you can better serve your client that way if you really know the circumstances, can't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, there's no substitute for experience.
Exactly. And the best tip, no substitute other than experience. So this is Michelle Gregory. Thank you once again for staying tuned. Sorry, we went a little long today, but we had such great information. And I wish we could have done this even longer. Again, I'm Michelle Gregory, your family law attorney, divorce coach, and mediator. And this is Winning at Divorce podcast. And we'll see you next time. Have a great day.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
This has been Winning at Divorce, a podcast to empower and assist you through the divorce processes and stages using stories and tips. We hope this podcast has shed some light on the main concerns that people face when going through a divorce. And remember, this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. If you need assistance, please seek professional advice from a licensed attorney or other professionals in your area. For more information about our services, please visit www.hmichellegregory.com.
Hello, I'm Michelle Gregory, your Winning at Divorce coach. Divorce is the most difficult and challenging time in a person's life. Regardless as to whether the divorce is your idea or not, the process can be very frightening, stressful, and overwhelming. You don't have to go through it alone. A divorce coach can assist you whether you just need a support person to vent or help you to identify your desires, set your goals, make plans to achieve your goals, implement your plans, or direct you to the right professional so that you can win at divorce. For more information regarding how my coaching services can help you, visit hmichellegregory.com or call me at 812-339-3600 to get started on your journey towards winning at divorce.